and Meredith. This is Harrison, and we are P1 Picks, a Formula One podcast that looks at data and analytics to give you betting lines on Formula One races. We are heading into Imola this weekend. Super exciting. This is the race that you'll remember got flooded out last year and was unable to take place. But Imola is in Italy, and we are really excited because this is the race we are expecting to see lots of upgrades from just about everyone across the paddock. With it being the first European race, that's typically, this is typically where we're going to see. I mean, Harrison, what are we going to see? I feel like, what is
This is the
really
most important race of the season.
the most important race of the season? Okay.
The upgrades are here.
Yeah.
Either Ferrari starts to catch Red Bull and Max actually has to work for this championship, or the season's over, right? Imola's going to end one of two ways. Red Bull runs away with it, or Red Bull is actually pushed because this upgraded Ferrari SF24 Evo Part B is actually going to be a huge upgrade. We won't know until free practice 1 or 2 or 3, or probably qualifying.
Or probably qualifying. Okay, so great point. I know in the news it's been all about the Ferrari upgrade, but I think we should start with the evil empire that is Max Verstappen and what we heard from Helmut Marko this week in regards to their planned upgrades.
Absolutely. So we all know that Red Bull is apparently bringing a huge update. Helmut Marko came out and said a couple of weeks ago, after McLaren won in Miami, that, they weren't worried about Norris. He's 50 points behind. Besides, we're bringing an upgrade to Imola. And this is the most important piece, which I expect a lot from. So, obviously, Red Bull have never struggled in correlation, right? Every time they normally bring an upgrade or they bring a step, the RB19 had a really big development step last year in Silverstone. The RB20 could make another step like that in Imola. And that's really got to scare the other teams, because this quiet confidence means that potentially Red Bull have found 3 or 4 tenths. We know that Adrian Newey talked about a couple of things that he didn't like about the RB20 that he wanted to clean up. If Adrian Newey is talking about things he can clean up on the RB20, just how much of a step forward have they made? It's the quiet confidence coming out of Helmut Marko that really kind of concerns me, because every team is talking about the Ferrari upgrades. Not everyone is talking about how big of a deal these Red Bull upgrades are.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I think too, it's always this race to catch up, right? With Red Bull and who Red Bull has been. I'm really excited, obviously, about all the other teams upgrading, because it might give us, a real fight. But it is scary, that quiet confidence. And outside of, Sergio nearly crashing the top 5 last time out in Miami, they've just kind of been unstoppable. So I think that's a really good point. We don't need to undercut or disvalue the upgrades that Red Bull might be bringing. In terms of the main challenger, I guess what we saw last time in Miami with McLaren and how well they were able to do and bring their upgrade, that's an option. We also, of course, let's jump into Ferrari. Tell me about Ferrari and this upgrade. What are we looking at?
I mean, this Ferrari upgrade is almost a new car. We know that almost all the bodywork has been redesigned. When we look at the Bahrain car on the bottom, and we look at the car that was tested, the SF24 that was tested on the Fiorano test track on Tuesday, the whole new side pod has been redesigned, right? This undercut is now much more aggressive. They've also changed the front lip of this radiator, right? Before there was the undercut, the underdip. Now they have taken that Red Bull style shark overcut, which means that the radiators potentially have been redesigned in this whole vehicle.
Okay.
The other thing that I want to call out here is the cooling louvers look to be much more efficient with just one single out. So it looks like Ferrari have not only changed the bodywork, but changed the internals around the radiator. This also means that Ferrari, more than most likely, will have brought a new floor. And that floor is what's going to produce so much downforce. More than 60% of the downforce from these vehicles is going to come from the tuning vanes and the floor. So it looks like with this upgrade, Ferrari is trying to do everything that it can to get as much airflow to the back of the diffuser, right? To the rear of the vehicle. And this upgrade is just much cleaner when you look at this area of the vehicle. I also want to point this out. they have redesigned this rear area right in front of the tire to be stronger and to potentially not flex more. So when the car is in yaw, when the car is turning, this update here should potentially give them a little bit more grip on high speed turns, one area they were really struggling in Mercedes with. So if you look at your sports books right now, you'll see anywhere from plus 100 to plus 125 for Charles on the podium. I love that bet. I love Charles on the podium here. I think he's going to be strong. I think the Red Bull updates probably mean that Max is safe for this weekend. Um, he might be maybe a tenth or two ahead, but I think Ferrari is really going to challenge them. They might be a little bit closer in qualifying on one lap than they are maybe in race pace. But I think this upgraded Ferrari with the new side pods, the new floor, and especially the detail that they showed to the rear kind of corner of this floor is really a big deal. And I think the betting books and the value isn't necessarily seeing that yet.
Okay, a few questions on this.
Yep.
First, it's in terms of betting, and this might go back to a podcast that we did last week. Why do you think Charles instead of Carlos? Do you think this update specifically? Do you think we're talking more track, temperature? What are we thinking? And is Leclerc the more valuable or the more likely to finish ahead this upcoming race?
So one thing I think we've generally seen is that Charles might struggle a little bit more to get the tires and maybe more specifically the front axle in the right temperature window,
Mhm.
especially in cold tracks. But now that we know that Imola is going to be warm, there's a chance of rain. With that temperature non-advantage moving to Carlos, I expect Charles to be strong. He was the lead Ferrari last year. He has generally been a tenth or so, a half a tenth or so ahead of Sainz. And I think we've seen that he's made a general step since Suzuka. He
Mhm.
looked, I think really strong in China. I think he looked really strong in Miami. I think he's starting to better understand this SF24. And I think the Evo, when you pack on a little bit more downforce, I'm just expecting Charles to get back to his kind of rightful place of being that number one Ferrari.
Yeah. And I think that a really good point on these upgrades, I mean, this is a big swing. We are talking, potentially a new floor. We're talking about redesigned side pods. So this is going to be really one of the most anticipated probably upgrades we're going to see all season for sure.
If this upgrade works and the Ferrari is not only even but ahead of Red Bull, imagine how this changes the championship.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine if Ferrari wins by 5 or 10 seconds. Now, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I do really think that Charles is going to be able to push Max through the first and second stint.
Yeah.
And if I was Red Bull, no wonder they're bringing an update. We just don't know how large that update is. We don't know if that update's been tested. And we don't know if that update's going to correlate to the track.
Yeah.
But there are also other teams that are bringing updates, and I think that's important.
Yeah. So in terms of for betting purposes, just before we leave Ferrari, do we see there being a shot of either Leclerc or Sainz being on pole this weekend?
I think you could look at Charles to be on pole. I'm not going to necessarily give that as an official bet, but if you've got $5 and you're looking to roll the dice, especially going into the weekend, I think Charles on pole is good. I
Yeah.
think if you're looking at qualifying margin, you'll see that there is under 1.5 tenths. I think it'll be under 1.5 tenths. I think it'll be a very close session. Um, Teams are going to have free practice 1, free practice 2, free practice 3 to really get those cars in the right setup window. And I think the drivers all know Imola, and I think it's going to be a very, very close race.
I think that's a great point. And despite Max being in pole every race this season, it does feel like we have a lot more challengers coming into Imola. Not to mention, this is Ferrari's home race. So I think that we are in store for a really exciting qualifying and then potentially race as well. The weather is something that you mentioned and that we definitely want to highlight. That will be something to definitely keep an eye on because, it's going to be interesting to see how these upgrades work in great conditions, but then also potentially in not so great conditions. In terms of on the podium and what we're looking for, do you think there's a potential for two Ferraris on the podium with a top three finish, or what are our thoughts there?
I think that Lando and the McLaren is too strong to put a really again. Lando is too strong to not be ahead of Carlos. And
Mhm.
Carlos will probably do enough to stay ahead of Piastri. I think the wild card here is where do we expect Sergio?
Yeah.
Sergio had a rough weekend in Miami. Um, Sergio puts a wheel in the wrong place in Imola. He drops down a couple spots. I'm not necessarily sure I see Sergio Perez on the podium. I could see Sergio looking at P4 or P2. It just depends on the upgrade, right? I
Hmm.
think if this Red Bull upgrade is worth 3 tenths and it puts them a good 3 tenths clear Ferrari, then yeah, Sergio potentially should be able to shore up P2. Um, but if this upgrade isn't as huge as Ferrari's and they're really neck and neck, I expect Charles to be one step ahead of Sergio this weekend. And generally, I'm kind of surprised the books don't see that.
Yeah.
Sure, the Red Bull is strong, but the books are really underestimating how big this Ferrari upgrade is. They're
Hmm.
also underestimating teams do well at their home tracks. Imola's a home track for Ferrari. The Tifosi are going to be there. Fred is not going to want to be embarrassed at home. I expect them to be strong.
Yeah, well, and gosh, the run that Fred Vasseur is on this year with the hirings, I mean, literally, basically, you can just start and end with the hirings, and that's not even on track. And then what we've seen from these drivers week in and week out, I think that after free practice, we definitely will have a better idea of where podium finishers are potentially. I know you mentioned Lando. We think he's probably too strong. But Piastri is also getting the full complement of the McLaren upgrade. Let's talk a little bit about the most recent race winners, McLaren, and what we're kind of expecting from them in Imola.
I think McLaren are just trying to hold it together, trying to put that package in a better setup window. They fired most of their shot and brought their biggest upgrade last race. So, I expect them to be probably a tenth or so behind Red Bull. In some places they'll be par, but the question really becomes how big is the Red Bull update? How far does that put Red Bull ahead? And how big is the Ferrari update? Because we kind of have an idea now that the McLaren update was probably good for about 3.5, 4 tenths, which is really roughly kind of putting them equal to the RB20 right now. Where does the RB20 end up, right? That is really the fundamental question. What is upgraded, right? Is the floor upgraded? Are the side pods upgraded? What exactly do we see as that step forward for Red Bull? And how effective is that Ferrari update? Is the question that we kind of look at because McLaren's kind of already shot their magazine.
Yeah. And I think a bet that I did really well on most recently was, who's in the top six? Are there two McLarens in the top six? Are there two Red Bulls, two Ferraris? Do we see a Mercedes in there? An Aston Martin? That's one of my favorite bets to do just because I think it kind of gives you a few more, gives you a little bit easier chance to win or, a more people to watch within a race. In terms of the best of the rest,
Yep.
um, who else are we looking for some evolution in terms of how their performance is going to be based on these upgrades?
Yeah, so I think Mercedes has an upgrade coming. It
Mhm.
looks like over the next 3 to 4 races that they'll be bringing new parts, especially trying to work on the low speed corners. So
Mhm.
I'm excited to see what they'll bring. It seems like the Miami upgrade actually was a little bit of a step forward. They were really a step ahead of Aston Martin, who really struggled. You could probably say that they were plus or minus the fourth fastest car out there. You know, Lewis was challenging Sergio on the same medium tire. He was only about a tenth or two slower than him at the end of the race. So it does kind of seem like Mercedes has made a little upgrade, made a little step forward. I think it was hidden by the fact that they had a really poor qualifying session with Lewis not getting out of Q2. So I think that hurt them. But I would expect Mercedes to be making continual upgrades. If they're able to get the correlation issue figured out and figured out really how to bring these upgrades consistently to the track, um, I think that'll be huge for them. The other
Yeah.
team that I want to call out is we've heard rumors of a really big update to Aston Martin, right? We know that they struggled a lot in Miami. Lance didn't score in the points. Alonso didn't score in the points. So they really needed to step forward here to be able to be competitive and really stay in that fifth spot. So it looks like side pods and floor is what I'm hearing. Now that's a huge update, right? Anytime you're talking about the side pods and the floor, those are the aerodynamic surfaces that are going to produce the most amount of downforce for this vehicle. So the fact that they're feeling confident about bringing these updates, and the fact that we saw such a huge step forward for McLaren, right? They will move forward, 4/10 of a second. Does this Aston Martin upgrade move them back ahead of Mercedes? Does the Mercedes upgrade keep them ahead of Aston Martin? I think that's just a really, really interesting midfield question that, I think we'll look for free practice 1, 2, and 3 to answer. Um, there are also some other really cool bets that I kind of wanted to call out.
Yeah.
Um, Max to win and Oscar to finish in the points at -190. I love this. Oscar with the upgraded McLaren is going to be really, really strong. So I think anytime you're able to see anything in the 100s with Max to win and a car that we know is really going to be the second to third fastest, I would expect Piastri to be top 6, man. You're getting 4 extra points here. He's really going to be solid. Another bet that I really like is, we kind of talked about this earlier. I like Charles the podium. FanDuel is giving that to us right now at -125. I like the value on that. You want to get a little bit more risky with this bet. I really like this at +135. Max to win and Charles on the podium. I think you could look at Max as 1 or Charles as 2, or you could look at Max as 1 and Charles as 3. I think this bet is really safe because we both know that Ferrari and Red Bull are bringing updates. I'm not expecting Sergio to be that strong this weekend. Sure, I'm expecting McLaren to be strong, but it might be Max, Charles, Lando. I think that's the kind of podium that I would expect to see. So, anytime you're able to get Max to win at plus odds, that's going to be really, really solid.
Awesome. Yeah, and then scroll down a little bit. I
Yep.
see Red Bull to win and Leclerc to finish top 6. I think it feels like a safe bet based on kind of just what we're expecting with these upgrades.
Yep.
And then I really love the Piastri one because I think he doesn't make too many mistakes. I think, like you said, if we can get a Verstappen win, that I feel like is home. That's safe. That's like what we have known to. That's what we've known from the last few seasons of Formula One. Anyone else in terms of upgrades? I know Williams. James Vowles has said that they're bringing a nice upgrade, so we could see potentially Williams in the points this
Nope,
weekend.
Williams
Maybe.
are dead to me.
Oh my God, no! Why?
Williams are dead to me. They're playing around in P14. That car doesn't make enough downforce. I mean, honestly, hot take. Williams is one of the worst cars on the field this year. It's the Williams, it's the Sauber. Those are going to be the two teams that I think are consistently going to be fighting for the back spots. Honestly, I think Alpine has made a little bit of a step forward. I think Haas kind of have their shit together. They figured out how to make the tires work over a long period of time. And that V-Carb car, the Racing Bull, is actually a sneaky good car. I think that's probably the 5th, maybe the 6th best car all season. So, you know,
The
Williams
level
are
of
struggling
trust
to
I
produce more
have,
downforce.
yeah, the trust I have in James Vowles for some reason is just unmatched.
They
I
don't
think
even have another chassis for Logan Sargent. Like, it's
I know, I know. I
in,
feel like, you know what, I'm like really confused with how they performed last year. I
yeah,
think that, I'm a huge Albon fan. Congratulations to Alex for signing long term. I feel like, a few years from now, we could probably be having a very different conversation. I kind of trust, hopefully, where they're going to end up. But
yep.
this might be the year that, Sauber and Williams are fighting for the best. I know you're right. Instinctively, I know you're right. In my heart, I feel you're wrong, but
They
I
just
know you're
haven't
right.
taken the step forward that the other teams have. And I
Right.
think as we look toward, the new season, everybody's bringing a new car. Everybody's learned something from last year. Even Mercedes learned something from last year. They really changed their concept, but it really doesn't seem like Williams was able to take that step forward. It doesn't seem like the car is producing more downforce, and it kind of seems like the team is in a little bit of a bad energy. It's great that they were able to retain Albon, but the negativity about not having another chassis for Logan kind of struggling to
Logan in
continually be at
general.
Albon's pace. It looks like they're really looking for those sprint weekends where they can do well in qualifying, bolt on the soft tire, kind of like they did in Miami, and try to stay in P8 and get some points there. But I'm worried about Williams. I think they've struggled secretly a lot this year, especially
Oh
with
yeah.
Alpine looking a lot stronger in the last couple of races.
Yeah, I don't think it's a secret. I mean, Williams is it just hasn't been like you said, like what everyone learned last year. I feel like a lot of teams have brought and improved on that, and it kind of feels like they're a little bit stuck. Speaking of Alpine, would Gasly be a possible P10 bet or Ocon even? Um, just in terms
I
of
like Yuki P10. I like Yuki in the
we are
points.
not
And
going to
here's
agree
why
on
I like
anything
Yuki
today.
in
I
the
feel
points.
like this is fine. This is fine. Let's talk
Yuki
it
in the
out.
points is Yuki's strong in Imola. That's one of his
Mhm.
best tracks. He started racing there, like when he did his Formula One testing, when he needed the kilometers to kind of get enough to get his super license. He went back and tested at Imola. Toro Rosso is from there, so I expect. Sorry, Racing Bull. I'm going to call them Toro Rosso. They're going to be called Toro Rosso. From now on.
V
People
carb.
think
You
they're
V
called
carb. I
Toro.
like
No, they're
that.
Toro Rosso. Toro Rosso has always been from that region of Italy, so they're putting together a good car. I think Yuki is secretly a top 5 driver of the season. So I think Yuki has not put a wheel in the wrong place. He's generally shown that he's got pace. I think he struggled a little bit in China, going to a new track that he hasn't been before, but he knows Imola, and I
A
expect
top
Yuki
five
to be
driver.
in the points.
A top five driver. This is where we're at.
I think, okay, top 5 current Formula One drivers: Max, Lando, Fernando Alonso, even though he struggled in Miami, Yuki, Charles.
What?
Yuki Charles. Yuki's crushing it this year. Yuki has yet to put a wheel in the wrong place.
Wait, are we talking in life or like just specifically this season, this
I
year?
am just talking these last 6 races.
Wow, you really are on the Yuki train this year. This is really
Yuki
just so
is
interesting.
fighting with Lewis and keeping it clean. I mean, you
Keeping
could
it
even
clean is the key part, though. Like, do we not feel like this is like I still have visions of Yuki kind of just a little bit losing it at times, and maybe he has matured, and this is a better situation and a better year for him. I find it hard to put Yuki over Carlos,
I
but
think I think Yuki is just I think Carlos started the season really well, but Carlos has not done well since China. Ever since he spun in China qualifying,
wow, we are we we are that was a big one, Harrison. I wasn't expecting that.
Yuki's a top 5 driver this season. He's secretly great.
I wish if you're just listening, I wish you could see my face right now. I'm just like in shock a little bit. Okay, let's see. What else do we want to get to? I think probably what we'll do in the next few days, maybe after free practice 3 before qualifying, is we'll come back to you with FanDuel share. That's who we're going to use this week for betting and for our odds that way, and we'll kind of deep dive and just give you a short and sweet, these are the bets we like based on what we've seen. But for now, I think that is about all we wanted to talk about going into Imola before the cars get on the track. I think it's really going to be, like you said, this is the make or break. Are we going to see Max run away by 25 seconds? And it is what it is. And, we get cutaways to him every 13 laps or so. And he's just, vibing in his car by himself. Or is this going to be the weekend where the race is back on, not to use a pun, but is this a Leclerc? Is this a Lando? Is this going to be something to where these races, every corner is going to matter? I'm excited. I'm hopeful
The
for
other
that.
question here is Max going to be able to win both races this weekend?
Oh gosh, the
Because
24-hour thing.
he's doing the 24 hours of Nürburgring.
I do. I do. I
So
do.
like how busy is this kid? Like, is he going to be really focused on winning a Formula One race with the Nürburgring and Team Verstappen out there, Team Redline, trying to win another championship?
I mean, at this point, I don't think that he's had to be overly super focused because he's been driving like, head and shoulders above everyone in a car that has been head and shoulders above everyone. So you know what? I don't even think that that's been something we've had to really consider, but that is a real, we're talking about a field that hopefully potentially is going to have, you're going to have to be pretty perfect, I think, to stay in front.
Yep.
So that's a great point. I love that. To me, I just see Max as like a machine, but that might just be the Formula One I know. I don't know.
No, he's got to come back and win this weekend. He knows he's under pressure to show that Red Bull still has it. He hasn't, lost twice in a very long time. So I
Yeah.
still expect Red Bull to be up there. But Charles on the podium, we're still got great odds for that. There's still plus odds for Max to win and Charles the podium, and I love that bet.
All right. Anything else we want to talk about before we get out of here for today?
I think we'll be following up with you guys after qualifying. Make sure to keep it locked to Twitter just to see any of those new updates. We want to see what Red Bull brought to the track. New floor, new side pods. What's it going to be?
Yeah, we're excited. All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys soon. Make sure to follow us for P1 Picks. I'm Meredith. That's Harrison. And have a good rest of the day, guys. Thanks.